And I think there is a very important realm of the human imagination that is the southern hemisphere of comedy, or perhaps we should say the dark side of the moon of comedy. Now, the idea of the dark side in Star Wars and such is associated with evil, malice, and hurt. But it isn't necessarily so. But it is different. It's the unknown. It's the numinous because it's mysterious. In fact, that's one of the reasons that night is so interesting. You don't know what's there until the light comes on, even the light of the stars. So here today we've made a discovery with the thought experiment of the Comedarium, looking for the dark side of comedy. So when you mesh, meld, embroil, cook together an astronomer and a comedian, if you're lucky, and if both of them have, as it were, plumbed their subject to the depths, or in the case of the astronomer, ascended to its heights, and if their marriage is sincere, you're going to get a hybrid which may have predictable properties and maybe not. We know that if two people of different ethnicities marry and produce offspring, almost certainly the children will occupy a middle ground, color-wise, between the two parents. So this doesn't become about race. I'll make it slightly more humorous and say that if blue marries green, then what you get is perhaps teal, an interesting color. What if a rainbow married white light? Well, then before you know it, you're getting into the laws of physics. But perhaps we should talk instead of the laws of comedy, which we're discovering with our thought experiments. What if those laws, that is LORES, that is wisdom folk tales masquerading as principles, what if they were living beings? This is the kind of thing that we could hear more about, and in the myth that we're creating, we will hear more about. Already, the spirit of laughter has created some projects just in this little chat. I mean, for example, for Sunday school children to create their own comedariums, first by drawing them in flatland in 2 pieces of paper, and then by curving a piece of cardboard, or taking a balloon, drawing on it, turning it inside out. So wherever we go, let's follow the argument wherever it goes. Children have invisible companions sometimes. I didn't have one myself, but I know people who do. I think it's a way of externalizing the idea of a higher self or best self. These days, young people like to have avatars, which is a word meaning, I think, incarnation in Sanskrit or Hindu perhaps. Now, I haven't penetrated much into virtual space, but from what I hear, you can go there and play all kinds of games and have adventures and romances and sensational experiences of the most ecstatic kind through your virtual creations and your avatars. So let's see if we can take this a little further as a social invention today. Let's suppose that we propagate a law of human nature in the future, in the spirit of what some call transhumanism, that says, there shall be no person who lacks a personal comedian avatar. Now, this is another version of saying that in the old days, the king had a fool in the court. Not just to make him laugh, but to help him give a sense of perspective. Or it could have been a queen. What if we never went out without having our personal comedian. Now, this isn't just now about a social invention. This is about merchandise. And this could be the thought with which I began talking to our TV producer before making this recording today, and that is the idea, what if the shot fired around the world was a joke told around the world? What if the joke told around the world was a product sold around the world? And what if that product could be gotten free with a meal at your favorite restaurant, your very own personal comedian? Now that would be worth having. One of the phenomena that a pastor, a chaplain, a counselor, but particularly I think a pastor sees is the amount of sorrow and sheer misery in the world. What makes it even worse, perhaps, is that it's veiled under the false self or persona that so often seems to be needed for society to function at all. I say seems to be because a lot of the times people imagine that the world will fall apart if they say what they really feel. And the world that falls apart is a world that falls apart, but it should never have been there in the first place, and that's society as false self. Theodore Isaac Rubin, in his book Compassion and Self-Hate, talks a lot about actual self, which is really emotional authenticity, and false self, which produces tremendous nervous strain. So let's try and tell this in the form of a joke that I heard or read somewhere, I can't remember, but I still like it very much. I'll tell it in my own way. So these two girlfriends meet. They've grown up and become middle-aged. And they meet for coffee, a well-known coffee house chain, and they're talking about their lives. And first one does her review, and the second one starts to speak, and she goes over all the stuff that she has. 2 cars, a lovely home in the loveliest town, 2.3 children, a loving husband, a land of opportunity life. And she says, you know, Stella, her friend's name is Stella. She says, I like everything about my life except how I feel about it. And that is a slightly mordant, a twisted sort of a joke, but it says so much. People, in my view, heroes, the heroes of the study of codependency, Melody Beattie, for example, Codependent No More is her book, they invite you to an exercise of healing. That exercise is very simple. It says, if you could feel anything, what would you feel? There's a kindness here in the impulse of comedy that connects with the kindness in the impulse of healing. And this is very much a part of my motive power today. And I hope all the other days too. That is the question, can we take a pick and shovel to the ice block that's encasing the person in a false self? Break through it. Can we melt that ice block